When creating a work of art, it's natural to gain inspiration from another source. It's easy to explain the features of a game by comparing it to something people know, like saying something is a Metroidvania, or saying a game plays like World of Warcraft. It's a great way to help an audience understand what a game is about, but it has one downside. Assuming the game is a classic, it can have a tough time owning up to the pedigree set by the example. And when your example is Chrono Trigger, one of the greatest games of all time, any game will be fighting an uphill battle against both unparalleled quality and powerful nostalgia. I'm Spencer with the Itch Network, and let's review Am Setsuna for the PC and PS4. At last year's E3, a new game developer was revealed named Tokyo RPG Factory. It was created by Square Enix, a company with a rich history in RPGs. In fact, considering the company now holds what was then Squaresoft and Enix, it's hard to find a classic RPG that wasn't made by them. Oh, Earthbound, I love you. So when exactly was the heyday of the genre? Was it the SNES era or the PS1 era? It's safest to say both. Both consoles had so many great contributions that it's hard and probably futile to pick which one was more seminal, and that's why the games in this time period are considered sacred. It seems like a no-brainer then that Tokyo RPG Factory was created to draw inspiration from this generation. Am Setsuna is the company's first entry in this renaissance. Touted as taking inspiration from Chrono Trigger, my personal favorite game ever made, this game has some big shoes to fill. With an active turn-based battle system, no random battles, and team attacks, yes, the X-Strike makes a cameo here, the game definitely takes many cues from its predecessor. You are Ender, assuming you chose the default name, a mercenary with a mask. Through circumstance, you wind up escorting a young redhead named Setsuna to her death. Okay, that's kind of odd. You see, Setsuna is a sacrifice, a person required to offer her life force to the gods in order to prevent an influx of monsters. It's you and your party's job to make sure she makes it to the end without getting killed. Kind of morbid, I know. Throughout the adventure, you'll travel from snowy village to snowy mountain to snowy forest. Yep, there's not a whole lot of variance between the different locations. Expect more of the same with every town you enter and every field you cross. It kinda makes you wonder, why only snow? Why not grass, or rocks, or sand?
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Oh, that makes sense, I guess. The point is, the environments don't do much to distinguish themselves, and although I respect the motif represented here, a little variety would have gone a long way to making the journey a bit more memorable. But speaking of segues, the characters leave much to be desired as well. They each have the potential to be interesting, but poor writing and confusing plot points hold them back. Each has their own backstory and reason for joining the party, and I generally wanted to see how their stories played out. Unfortunately, every time they chose to speak, it felt like some child wrote the dialogue, like something from an RPG Maker game, or the Fast and the Furious movies. The characters' motivations would constantly be something like, well, I guess we have no other choice, or this isn't one of those scenarios we can talk our way out of. Also, here's a quick message to Tokyo RPG Factory. If you give the main character dialogue options, make them different and make them matter. Too many times in the game my character would have two options. We should do A, or A sounds like a good idea. You guys can handle that one. Also, regardless of what I picked, we would always do the same thing anyway. Why give me these choices? The game also does a poor job of developing my character. Some of the cast seems to think my character is a real badass. I'll say something nice, and they'll reply with, Wow, that's so unlike you. For one, I just met these characters 15 minutes ago. And secondly, I've been nice the whole game. I gave no reason to think I'd react otherwise. I'm not sure if this was a translation issue, but this is probably my biggest gripe of the game. But arguably, the most important part of these games is the combat system. The meat of any RPG is in killing endless monsters and collecting loot. So let's talk about it. Combat is turn-based, using an active time meter to determine when you can fight. When the meter is full, you're able to choose an attack, cast spells, or use items. If you wait long enough while your ATB is full, you'll gain a special attack. This is essentially an empowered attack or ability, triggered by an easy-to-hit timed button press. I really liked this system. It adds a bonus feature to every move, which could mean more damage, restorative bonuses, status ailments, and so on. It made waiting a viable option, giving the combat more depth than most traditional turn-based games. Your spells are acquired via Itchinites, magical crystals forged by items dropped in battle, or found conveniently on the ground. These crystals are attached to your gear and fall under different categories. It's novel for sure, and I liked finding new materials and wondering what new weapons and rings I could create, but I felt like it wasn't really as customizable as I thought. Each character has their own abilities they're allowed to use, as well as spells available to all. It's not really deep customization, but honestly it doesn't need to be. If there's one flaw to the combat, it's the simple manipulation of the system that kills its momentum. Once you realize the pattern of encounters, this game is a breeze. You see, just like arguments with your girlfriend, the fighting starts before you throw your first punch. Combat is initiated when you get too close to an enemy. The trick is to initiate from behind them or to the side. It's super easy and works almost 100% of the time. If you do it correctly, and come on, it's super easy. All 3 of your party members start with a full ATB and 1 special attack stored up. 3 supercharged AoEs are usually enough to clear an encounter, even with monsters in new zones. While it sounds strategic, it makes the game too easy, and it never changes. There are some enemies in this game that I can't even really describe since I usually massacred them before they could ever make a move. Also, positioning has more importance than it did in Chrono Trigger, but it still wasn't used very effectively. I was able to get through this game without giving it much forethought. I will say that boss fights get more challenging towards the latter third of the game, which I actually appreciated. So here we have a Chrono Trigger-like game with a decent combat system that actively removes challenge, a serviceable story with poor writing, and snow. Lots of snow. The icing on the cake is the soundtrack. It's heavy on piano, too much so for my taste. I'll leave it as decent since so many others seem to like it that it may just be a personal taste issue. It definitely wasn't bad. Also, I wish I could say the graphics knocked me off my feet, but that just wasn't the case either. They could have either gone the full retro route, or gone with the pre-rendered backgrounds of the PS1 era. Yes, please. But instead, the game looks like a high-resolution Nintendo 3DS game. I think it really missed the mark with the graphics, which is a real shame, as it could clearly have been so much more. There are some nice effects here and there, but for the most part, the game lacked that wow factor of the classics. The game's asking price is $40, and considering the story is a mere 20 hours long, and somewhat flat at that, I think this may be a bit too high. I would wait for it to drop to $20, and here's why. This game was done in a classic style, and I'm not convinced it can actually compete with the games it's trying to emulate. Chrono Trigger is a far better game than this, in every aspect, and you can get it for so much less. In fact, most famous SNES and PS1 RPGs were better than this, in one way or another. I can't truly say that this game stands out amongst these gems. If you're dying to play a JRPG, and you've already exhausted everything else, then go for it. But if you still yet to play the classics that inspired this game, I would shoot for those first, and wait for this one to drop a bit. It's certainly commendable that Tokyo RPG Factory wanted to give us what fans have been asking for, and I think this is for sure a step in the right direction. I can't wait to see what they come up with in the future, but I also can't wholeheartedly recommend this game to anyone at full price. I give Am Setsuna a 5 out of 7.